Hello, everyone. Thank you very much indeed for coming to this session. My name is Ros Atkins. I'm the presenter of a global news program called Outside Source, which is on here in the UK on the BBC News channel, later on, in fact, at 9 p.m, and also on BBC World News. And we're going to spend the next hour focusing on a large group of people who are hugely important to the travel industry, what we're calling affluent millennials. And we're going to try and understand more about the traveling habits and the desires and the needs of affluent millennials. As you're watching, if you want to send questions my way to put to our esteemed guests, we're using Slido. If you use the hashtag WTMLDN, you'll be very easily able to get those messages to me. So Slido, WTMLDN is the hashtag, and you'll be able to see details on the screen as well. Before we start defining what we mean by affluent millennials, I want to immediately introduce you to a fantastic panel that we've got the company of for the next hour, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Hi, namaste. This is Deepak, CEO, Nepal Tourism Board.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Haitham Attar, the CEO of the Ras Al Khaimah Tourism Development Authority, which is one of the 7 emirates in the UAE, close to Dubai, for those of you who don't know where it is.
Hi, my name is Julie Falconer, and I write a blog called A Lady in London, which is about London and travel all over the world.
Good morning, everyone, or is it afternoon? My name is Fatuma Hirsi Mohammed. I'm the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism in the Republic of Kenya.
My name is Anthony Berklich, and I'm the founder of Inspired Citizen, which is a luxury travel platform based in New York. Also a writer for Harper's Bazaar. And Inspired Citizen, a lot of our readers are affluent millennials, so I'm excited to talk about that.
Lovely to see all 5 of you, and as well as using Slido, of course, if you've got questions you'd like to put to our guests, just pop your hands up and we'll get a microphone to you. But before we do anything else, let's define what we mean by affluent millennials. I should say my colleague Hamish, who did this big piece of research for the BBC, is here with us, so if you have questions, I can get him to help me out, and of course you can talk to him afterwards. But let's define what we mean by millennials. Well, we're talking about 16 to 34-year-olds for the case of this particular study. And if you look at this group of people, to state the obvious, they're getting older. And as they get older, what they're doing is changing. They're buying homes, they're going more and more expensive holidays, they're getting married, they're having families, and that's having a huge impact on how they want to travel and the experiences that they want to have. Now, we've been looking at the Global Web Index, the GWI. It surveys around 40 countries. It's estimating there are over 940 million millennials. And in terms of how we define affluent, well, clearly affluence in terms of how much money you have varies from country to country. So we said we would look at the top 25% of incomes in the countries that we were taking on. So we looked at 8 different countries: Australia, Germany, France, South Africa, the US, Canada, Hong Kong, and Singapore. And I wonder how many people you think were planning a leisure trip just in those countries in the next year. Do you think you could put a figure on it?
500 million.
Not that many. 21 million is the number of people we think are planning a holiday in the next 12 months. We should also say affluent millennials are 18% more likely to travel for leisure multiple times than Generation X or baby boomers. So these are people who want to move, and these are people who have quite specific requirements from holidays, and they're definitely not the same as the requirements of Generation X or the baby boomers. And in terms of which country of those 8 has the most affluent millennials on that list,
The United States?
it's going to be the United States because of its size, of course. We estimate there are over 12 million affluent millennials in the US. So we're talking about huge, huge markets. And one more question for you before we turn to our panel. In terms of Europe, affluent millennials in Europe were asked to name their top destinations. What would you think? Countries that they would like to go to.
The US?
The US, there you go, you've got one.
Asia region.
There are no Asian countries on that list, I'm afraid.
Italy?
Australia?
No. So I'll tell you, the US, Spain, the UK, Germany, and Greece. So I guess what we're learning here is that by getting a huge amount of data on this group, we can start much better understanding the kind of things that they would want. And let's start with that issue of what affluent millennials want. Some of you, I think, could be described as such. Others are catering for affluent millennials. What do you think defines their desire from a travel experience?
So I think, look, we've run an independent study on the GCC youth. So the countries of the GCC, where we know there's a tremendous amount of wealth, and if you look at Saudi Arabia alone, 70% of the population are under the age of 30, and there's a lot of wealth in that particular country. And their travel and their behavior is completely different than their counterparts, if you like, the non-affluent. Now, there's a great deal of individualism, so they want really everything to be specific to them. And if we just go towards cars, for example, whilst every Mohammed and Ahmed can afford a Ferrari, which is a $250,000 car, they'll still spend another $250,000 on the same Ferrari to make it individual. Right? So this is the sort of affluent travelers or affluent millennials that we deal with in that part of the world. Now, of course, travel, as you said, they do multiple travel per year, but we also understand that they're looking for luxury indulgence. It's not just the travel to stay at the Ritz-Carlton or to stay at the Westin or the W, but what is the Ritz-Carlton going to deliver in terms of experience that they can take away, because they can they got the money, so they can afford anything anybody else can.
I think that, can you hear me? Yeah. I think that basically, if you're looking at a millennial traveler in the affluent market, that you need to understand two things. They have big egos. They want to show off a little bit. So creating experiences that are individual, that are tailored to them, where they feel special, and speaks to kind of, the fact that they want to share this experience on social media, to their friends, to their family, people that are following them. But then also something that is layered in that speaks to their heart. They definitely like community involvement or some story or something wrapped around their travel experience. So if you can speak to their heart as well as the side of them that's a little bit more superficial, and create an experience around that, then that's something that they will go for. Unlike their parents' generation, they will take a trip very spontaneously. They're not planning it a year ahead of time. They will plan it a week ahead of time, throw it together through recommendations, blogs, social media, friends, and they'll go. The world has shrunk, and they don't view getting on a plane for 10 hours from New York to Tel Aviv or to Sao Paulo as a big deal. And you have to be immediate and cater to that sort of new mentality and communication.
I think it's also worth saying that millennials like to feel like they're discovering something. It might be the same thing everyone else has discovered, but if they feel like they're discovering it and maybe even not many other people have discovered it, then that's more powerful than an experience that maybe everyone else has had. So instead of going to London and saying, I saw Big Ben, it's I went to London and I went to this really hip place in East London. It's up and coming and it's only locals know about it. And I think also in addition to that, millennials value living like a local. They might go to London again, but instead of staying in the West End or in South Kensington where a lot of people stay, they want to get an Airbnb in Hackney and really feel like they have settled in just like people who live here.
I think for people who are millennials and want to travel to places that are far out and have unique experiences, I think Africa in a country like Kenya gives them the opportunity to come and see things and experience things that perhaps they cannot experience. As you said, somebody can go to a local, like a Hackney, an Airbnb. They can come and live in a tent in the wild, with the wild animals, or kiss an elephant, or kiss a giraffe, So the experiences that they get are very unique in a place like Kenya.
You can kiss elephants in Kenya?
And they would come and, live with the community. Sorry, what do we say?
I was just saying, can you kiss elephants in Kenya? And I can see the front row here shouting out, yes, you can.
Yes, you can. The nose or whatever it is, you can kiss it. Yeah, but you can kiss a giraffe more, easier. So the experiences that you can get living with a community like the Maasai and living in, you know, the mud houses, just like when they go to South Africa and they visit Soweto. So in Africa, you can get a lot more experiences that you won't get anywhere else in the world.
And help guide us through what might appear to be a contradiction here between the desire to be luxurious and the desire to be authentic. Now, you mentioned Soweto, that's a place I know very well in South Africa. That's doing a great job of offering much more authentic experiences for tourists, but you wouldn't describe it as luxurious. So how do you resolve that tension?
If I can, I think, I mentioned earlier that luxury indulgence. I think, as talked before, the millennials are not necessarily just looking for luxury in the sense of luxury, but a luxury in their own mind is going to something that is off the beaten track, that is local, that is authentic, and being able to showcase that, on their Instagram account to say, look what I've done, look what I've seen. You haven't been there yet, because let's admit they all want to be the trendsetters, right?
This is interesting, though. You're stretching and changing the definition of luxury, and I can see you nodding your head down there.
Yeah, it really has changed. I think for millennials, it's not about everyone loves a Chanel bag or a Mont Blanc bag. But that's almost a given, and unfortunately and fortunately, because of social media and the consumption of information and sharing of information, all those things are very much at your fingertips, at least seemingly. Even if you can't afford it, you see pictures of it all day long.
If you had the money, you could get it.
Yes, so it's sort of not like, that's not an untouchable thing so much anymore. Even if you can't afford it, you see it all day. So I think that's not the luxury that necessarily is speaking to them so clearly. It's more about having that individual experience, that unique moment that no one else has, or going somewhere that is really off the beaten path and discovering something new and sharing that. Now, if there happens to be a Chanel bag in the photograph, fine, but it's more about that experiential travel that is the luxury that speaks to them.
Before we carry on talking, let's just introduce a few more facts and figures from the BBC study into our conversation, because we've been looking at the frequency by which affluent millennials travelled. 2/3 of them went on an international holiday last year. 70% are planning a trip next year. 92% of affluent millennials are more likely to book a premium hotel than millennials. So these are heavy leisure travellers. They have both the means and the desire, and I guess the challenge is how we offer that premium experience that's quite different to the premium experience we might have offered the generation before. How do you rise to that challenge?
I think the understanding of millennials about luxury is quite different. The luxury means rarity, the rare experience that they want to explore. So for development aspect also, like for destination development, there used to be huge investment earlier. For example, linking with roads, electricity development, communication development, something like that. But now, because of expansion of this market segment, it is very easy. Just create and curate and communicate, and there is the product. So it has become more easy, and I think the affluent travelers, millennials, are not only affluent, they are inspiring travelers also.
So if we take it as read, and you all seem to agree that we need to change our definition of luxury, change how we cater to this desire to feel different and special, how do we package that up in a way that doesn't feel packaged up, which presumably is the last thing these people want?
I think there's a lot of ways that it can be approached, and some of them are just things that tailor something more specifically to certain demographics, maybe, if it's female or male, or where they're coming from, that makes it feel a little bit more special. It can also be something where it's giving access. I think luxury can also be defined as giving access to something that not everybody gets to do. So maybe you get to meet someone people don't get to meet, or you get access to the roof deck that nobody gets to go to, so you can Instagram the best view that no one else has Instagrammed yet. And I think there are just sort of little things that can be done that can tweak it just so that people feel like they're getting this unique experience.
I think you also have to think about what the millennials need. I mean, they're a connected community. They are on all sorts of devices at the same time. They need quick Wi-Fi because they want to share the experiences as soon as they can. So instead of expecting them to stay in their hotel rooms, you must make the whole hotel area accessible to them. And also, if you're going, they can set up anything in the middle of the wild, in the middle of, as you say, on the rooftop. But they want that ease of communicating with their peers and showing off what they are experiencing real time. So I think those opportunities, the hotels need to think about that instead of having room service, for instance, or instead of having a restaurant where they have to have their breakfast. They should have open spaces where they can just grab something available easily to them, eat as they're doing whatever they're doing. Yeah, so I think we have to take their needs into consideration and think about how to make it easier for them to move around.
I'm interested in that idea of changing some of the established routines of holidays, like having to go to one place for breakfast. Are there other examples of best practice you could share with us where something you've either experienced or you've done has really connected?
I think in my view, we're talking about the millennials or the affluent millennials and packaging them up all in one box, and I don't think that's the right thing to do, because you do have a big scale of millennials in terms of demographics or age. So you do have families who are millennials, and you've obviously got the younger generation who are also still affluent millennials. You have young global leaders who are also millennials who fit into that age group as well. So talking to these different groups within the affluent millennials has to be very focused and very specific. Yet alone, we know that all of them react to one common thing, which is video content, right? So packaging a video, for example, will have to have multiple stories that talks to the different audiences within that group in order for you to get your message through. So some of the examples we have done in Ras Al Khaimah, for example, to attract the millennial groups who we know the younger generation looks after, for adventure. And it's not just the norm mainstream adventure activities, water sports and jet skis. No, they want something that's really completely different. We're building the longest zip line in the world in Ras Al Khaimah, and it's connected to 2 mountains, and it's up at 1,800 meters high. Now, I can tell you the amount of millennials who have wrote to us once they heard and seen videos, the content that we have shown was phenomenal. But at the same time, we've built an adventure park for the younger children, because you still have the millennials who want to do the longest zip line in the world, but also want to take their kids on an adventure at the same time. So in order to connect to the 3 sort of sets of affluent millennials, you'd have to have a story on a video that speaks to all of them at the same time.
So one great example. Are there things that have really worked?
I mean, I think it's creating events around things. I spoke yesterday here in the theater and spoke about one of my favorite things I saw the tourism board of Estonia do. Which Estonia is an amazing destination. It's really not known for food globally, but they wanted to change that. So they created experiences around local hobbies and pastimes, like they're known for their mushrooms that grow in their forest. They're all different kinds of mushrooms that local families go out and they pick on the weekends and make mushroom soup or whatever. And they created sort of a tourism effort around that to get people that were visiting Tallinn and Estonia to go out and experience that on a local level, even taken by a private guide, which that's luxurious, right? You've got a private car, private guide going, showing you the mushrooms, you're picking them. They also created a program in Tallinn where they partnered with local residents who opened up their homes for meals during the summertime. So instead of going to a restaurant, you would have this amazing local chef cooking for you in their home. The menus changed daily. You would not only meet a local, but you would experience Estonian cuisine and cooked in, pretty much a beautiful setting, someone's home. I did that. The woman who cooked for me used to be a Playboy model. She was beautiful. She had a family. She had an interesting story that I could talk over with her during dinner and experience local cuisine. So having that experience was special. It was unique. No one else I knew had ever done it. And it created a new marker for the Estonian Tourism Board, a new attraction to get people to come for something interesting that they never otherwise would have known that country existed for.
You mean to say you don't know anyone who's had dinner in Estonia with a former Playboy model? I can't believe
this.
No,
not that I found on Instagram anyway. No hashtag for that.
I agree, but I think when we're talking about millennials, we also have to think about how they travel. They're not like the baby boomers who perhaps is the husband and wife or the partners who go traveling. they like to go as groups. They're young people. They like to go group as come together. Let's just fly out to this place, or let's go experience this. Go for this concert here, as he said. The food festivals in certain countries. So I think we need to think about how we appeal to them and provide activities that appeal to the group. Whether it's adventure, whether it's mountain climbing, whether it's a concert, they like to do things together. They like to share. They like to experience things together, because it's all about the experience. For them, it's not the money that they spend, but it's the experience that they get. Yeah.
I think adding to that, there's also a lot of millennials who are fluent who travel alone, and I think solo female travel is a big element of that too. And I've traveled alone as a woman. I have a lot of friends who do. I plan trips for clients through my blog, and I have a lot of clients who are solo female travelers that ask me to plan trips. So I think catering to that, oftentimes a solo traveler gets screwed on sort of everything from hotel room costs to package tours where you have to pay a single supplement, things like that. And I think making it more friendly for solo travelers can be
And for those travelers, do they want to spend time alone, or do you have to factor in how they'll get a social experience when they're on holiday?
I think it's a bit of both. It depends on the person. Some people just want to go and really kind of find themselves or have a holiday where they don't have to engage with the world, because that's what they're looking to escape. And I think other people want to go alone, but they're going alone because they just don't have anyone to go with, and they want that social element. So it really depends.
Can I just add also on the groups, on the affluent millennials, they differ from their counterparts, the non-affluent millennials. Is, I believe, from what we see, the affluent millennials want to be in a group of 3 or 4 max, where the non-affluent would be at least 20 people.
Interesting.
Yeah, you see bigger groups than the smaller groups.
Number is bigger, but the group is smaller. And I think in our case also, for example, the same thing is being taken as differently. For example, in our case, rice plantation is a very long phenomenon. We used to have since long. But now, the rice plantation festival is becoming a new product in Nepal. So that kind of activities are being well consumed in this segment.
Okay, got a question here on Slido. Any of you are welcome to use it. WTMLDN is the hashtag, saying, well, if the definition of luxury is changing, how quickly can the industry catch up to respond to this growing market? I mean, do you feel like you're responding quickly?
I think, yeah. I think the definition is not changing, it is expanding.
Okay.
Another thing is also becoming understanding of this luxury.
Do you feel like
I think
the industry is changing?
A lot of tourism boards, it's hotels and other travel products, it's easier for them because they can sort of set their own rules if they're not part of a massive hotel chain, and they can be a little bit more nimble if they're willing to, if their leadership is willing to allow the people who are running the show to put certain new things into place and listen to the environment in which they're existing. I think a lot of tourism boards have problems with that because they're government-run organizations, and there's a lot of red tape and a lot of rules and processes and regulations. But my hope for them on a genuine level is that they will become more nimble, because any destination has something amazing to talk about, I believe. Even if you have the ugliest cities in the world, if you have the worst weather in the world, there's something to talk about, there's a story to share, and there's a visitor to attract. But you have to be nimble, because if not, you're going to miss the point, and you're going to just fall away, and no one's going to care. So I think it's really important to be that way and to just listen and communicate. Find out how millennials, whether they're affluent or not affluent, are communicating. They want to communicate through social media. Follow them on Instagram, comment on their photographs, find out what they're posting, and then respond.
So before we come in with any more thoughts, and inevitably social media is going to run all the way through this discussion, I'm just going to ask my colleague who's helping me with the slides if we can go to the findings the BBC had in this big study of affluent millennials looking at social media habits, because we found, and you won't be surprised by this initial finding, that they strongly shared their experiences on social media. More than half were likely to check in on venues on social media when they were on holiday. They were 2/3 more likely to do that than millennials, so affluent millennials more likely to say where they are. 1/3 would live share where they are using live streaming products like Periscope and Facebook Live, and they score higher in all aspects of social media. So this group, probably more than any other group in the world, are sharing their experience, and I guess that has an impact on the experience that you can offer.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying about having proper connectivity. If there's no connectivity in a hotel, a millennial will not stay there. They need that constant access and interaction. And so for hotels, they need to be nimble enough to ensure that there's connectivity that is strong. Because it's better to have no connectivity than to have slow connectivity, really. Yeah. It's so.
I think we all know that feeling.
It's even worse. Yeah. Thank you.
So frustrating.
Yeah.
I think social media is part of the travel experience for millennials. It's not just I went somewhere and I shared about it. It's I'm there and I'm live streaming it and I'm Instagramming it and I'm sharing on Facebook with my friends and I'm tweeting about it. I'm doing a YouTube video, whatever it is. Even for people who aren't necessarily considering themselves influencers or trying to be influencers, it is that kind of so much wrapped up in their lives that they can't get away from it even when they're traveling.
But what I want to understand is, given that we know they're going to do this, what can the people who are hosting these people do to make sure that what's being shared is positive and is perhaps attractive to other people? Because they're doing it. I don't quite understand how you insert yourself into that process.
Yeah, I always say for brick and mortar businesses, make your business look Instagrammable. I know that sounds ridiculous, but if you live in London, you've probably seen somewhere on Instagram the facade of Peggy Portion. It's a cupcake shop in Belgravia, and I think almost once a week at least I see somebody Instagramming it because they, around their door, have put this amazing sort of floral extravaganza that's really just beautiful to photograph. And so people line up, they queue up to photograph themselves, they queue up to photograph the door, and they've done an amazing job. And that was probably a pretty simple thing for them to do. And so I think the travel industry can do that too. Make your hotel lobby Instagrammable. Allow opportunities. I was in Santorini last week, and the hotel was giving me a tour when I first got there, and they kept saying, our pool is the most Instagrammed pool in Santorini. And they've obviously spent time investing in a pool that is good on Instagram.
How do you make a pool Instagrammable? For those of us who have pools, it doesn't include me.
It's about beauty, though. I think that, hotels and destinations, but, especially brick and mortar businesses that are in travel need to pay really strong attention to that. When you're hiring people to do your lighting and do your interior design and pick your surfaces and everything, it's so important. It's so important to create light, bright, beautiful spaces that people can use and photograph. Not just for the aesthetics of it or for the Instagram worthiness of it, but just in general, it'll last you longer, it'll take you further. You won't have to redo it in 10 years.
Right.
But I really think it can't be said enough how important that is because people want to share beauty. Everyone's attracted to beauty. There's nothing worse than going into a hotel lobby and there's a bunch of ugly fluorescent lights, like the kinds that are right here on us, kind of. These ugly, making us... if you have those...
You're looking great, honestly.
If you have that, and who's going to want to take a picture of it,
right.
So pay attention.
Let's get into the questions. I'll warn my colleague Hamish that one of them's coming his way, so if you could get a microphone to Hamish, that would be useful. But here's a question saying, how do these millennials find and choose their tour provider? And I'm very interested in this. Given that we're getting a better understanding of what they want, how do they get it? How do they assemble these quite unique and these varied holidays? How would they assemble a holiday in Nepal?
I think since the whole economy is going from owned economy to access economy, in travel also it is something like that. Now I feel like everyone is host and everyone is guest. So it is going very, very differently. So that's all phenomena we need to understand.
I don't think that millennials necessarily would go to a tour operator per se. I think they trust their friends' opinions, their networks. They would trust perhaps a blogger or somebody, an influential person who's talking about a particular place, and look for that place, and they would ask many questions, before they actually decide. And they do tend to listen to the people who are close to them and their opinions more. I don't think they just wake up one morning and travel somewhere.
I think most
So
travel.
go ahead, and then I'll come to you.
I think most travel for the affluent millennials is driven by Instagram rather than any tour provider.
I think too, I mean, if tour providers want that business, they can partner with established bloggers and things so that they can lead their readers and other people to them. And also I think it's about being as niche as possible, offering experiences that nobody else has,
right,
offering them access that nobody else has. If you can do that and then market those experiences to them, they might not come to you to plan every single element of their trip, but they might come because they can have a private lunch at the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, or they might come to you for some other reason, something that you offer that no one else does. So you have to partner with the right people and offer the right things, and you can still exist instead of kind of falling by the wayside.
We're going to come to the issue of marketing and advertising in a moment because the BBC survey looked at that, but let's just deal with a couple more questions. Here's one that's definitely crossed my mind. Where are these affluent millennials getting their money from? There are only so many high-tech millionaires. Do the rest get their money from their parents? Hamish, do we know what their incomes are, what kind of jobs they do?
Yes, there's quite a few interesting things. I mean, I think someone did mention a little earlier that this is a very big group, isn't it? 16 to 34s. Very good to point out that there's a lot of complexity inside there. We did it by top 25% by household income. So yes, you're right. Or the person that asked the question, big chunk of those, particularly in the 16 to 22-year-olds, may be in an affluent home. But we would count them as an affluent millennial because they still have that attitude and they still have that buying power via their parents. So that is a part of it. The other one that's worth pointing out is you can gain affluence in a different way now as a millennial in this new bizarre world that we live in. You know, it used to be that you would work for years and years and years at a single job and you would attain very slowly and incrementally your success. And then you buy your boat or whatever it is that you do, that it becomes a marker of that success. Now, because everything is being made available to everyone, desktop publishing software, creation software, you don't need to go anywhere to be anything anymore. You can be something from your home. We have, CEOs can be 19 now. They can be the CEO of their own record label that they made last Tuesday in their house. It's just a completely different way of being now. So you can gain affluence very differently.
Hamish, thank you. And that is Hamish. So at the end of the session, if you want more details, that's the man to approach. This is very interesting. There was a question here, and it's just come off the screen, but the point was places like Iceland have done incredibly well recently, largely off the back of millennials. And I mean, just personally, I can think of so many people I either work with or I know who have gone to Iceland and who have visually shared their experience. The question was, what's next? Which destinations are we less aware of, but in 5 years' time we'll be saying, I mean, clearly three of you are hoping it'll be
ours.
Yours. Are there ones that you would point out?
I think there are a number of destinations that are making a push for that. I know the Faroe Islands are bringing lots and lots of influencers, especially Instagrammers, out to take pictures, and it's beautiful scenery and kind of luring people there because it's such an under-the-radar destination. So I think they could be one destination, but I think it's really an open playing field in terms of which destinations really make millennials want to go there, either through influencer marketing or in other ways that they've decided are going to reach that demographic.
I think there's destinations like Greenland, Mozambique, like you said, the Faroe Islands, Romania, certain destinations that are making the push and that are offering something exotic and interesting that are maybe a little uncovered and undiscovered at certain people in the world that are doing a good job. But I think it is open to anybody who's willing to invest. I think Croatia did an amazing job I know personally from getting influencers there and millennial travelers to talk about their islands and their beaches and all of that, just looking at things that they could sell as a travel product and marketing them in an appropriate way to the right people.
And Madam PS, I wonder if there is a greater challenge for countries like Kenya, which we all know about, which has a long-established tradition of tourism. Is it harder to seem new, to seem different than it might be for places which in the past have had a very small travel industry?
I hope that some of the people will be looking at Kenya to come to. Kenya has been known mainly for the beach and safaris, but we're looking at other areas that may be interesting to millennials. We're working very hard in sports tourism, and gastronomy. We have over 40 tribes in Kenya with different cultures, with different cuisines. And if somebody wants that experience that is different, it is a country that you could consider coming to. So for us, diversifying into other areas and not just concentrating on the usual beach and safari will give opportunity to Instagrammers to come. As we were talking earlier about what can the establishments do in terms of making their environment more aesthetically beautiful. In Africa, I mean, the sunsets are to die for. The scenery, you can get all sorts of amazing scenery that you can take photographs of. So Instagrammers would have a really, really good time in Kenya.
And I think it's important to point out, too, for destinations that might have some stigma attached because of safety and things like that, to do your best to point out what's real versus perceived danger, because obviously in the media, and I'm part of the media, things can get out of hand, stories can get out of hand, and by the time it reaches your prospective client, they can be completely shut down going there because, they think it's like the most dangerous, worst place in the entire world. So you have to combat that. The good thing is that millennials are more adventurous, so and more researched, I think, and they're not going to believe just one news report. So they are willing to take a little bit more risk. But if there is that issue for you, or if it does exist, you have to do a really, really good extra job of trying to combat that with appropriate information so they understand that.
I agree about security, but I mean, it was a point where terrorism was only happening in Africa, was happening, I don't know. Now it's everywhere. I mean, it's in New York, it's in Paris, it's in London. Yeah. It's everywhere. So really, when it comes to security, no one can say that this country we should not visit. And normally what happens is that something happens in a country, and it's like maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago, but people keep harping on about it, and they forget the one that happened last week, It's a bit lopsided, I think, and media should try not to do like that, because it's a double jeopardy. You have this problem of terrorism or crime or whatever it is, and then the media blows it out of proportion, and you're punishing that country twice.
Yeah.
By not going there. And yet, if something happens in Paris, it's Je suis Paris, but when it happens in another far off place, nobody says Je suis Nairobi, you know what I'm saying? So it's just the unfairness of media, but that's what the world is, and we have to live with it. But as you said, we'll work double hard to make sure that people see the truth. Yeah.
Right. I think it's fair to say that recent research in the U.S. shows there are more people dying in a bathtub than actually by a terrorist attack. So it's what media really exploits and puts forward to people. And yes, safety and security is everybody's utmost priority. And I believe millennials are quite savvy. They do their research full on about any destination before they go. They do the research about the transport they're going to take, which air carrier they're going to fly with. I think they are much smarter than the other generations.
But let's unpack this a bit, as I guess the representative of the news media. If you take something like the Paris attacks, of course the news media has to cover that. And the reality is, I was at a big travel event a few months ago, the numbers of visitors to Paris went down starkly after Paris. Turkey has seen huge dips in its numbers because of security. To what degree should any destination, and three of you represent individual destinations here, should you address concerns about security, and to what degree would that be a mistake because it's drawing attention to what could be a problem?
Look, there has to be a balance. So there has to be a great degree of addressing security, but also when you go to destinations, and security has to be invisible. So when you go to the UAE, for example, when you go to Dubai, you're not going to find many policemen on the road. You're not going to find army with guns on the road. But guess what? They keep it safe, right? Because Big Brother's watching, whether you know it or not. Now, it's really important that you focus on having invisible safety and security rather than walking into a hotel like you do in some countries and you feel like you walked into an airport, sometimes worse. You're worse than walking into an airport. You just have to take your jacket off, pretty soon you're going to walk into a hotel naked right? Because of all the security processes that you need to go through.
I think safety and security is one of the prime concern for every travelers. But millennial segment is very smart because they choose to eat with communities where they get hygienic food. Because I think the communities are the most important people who are very conscious about the safety and security. So destinations where the communities are very friendly are the safest place, and this segment is choosing destinations like that, like Nepal.
Before we continue, I want to just come up to the slide that we've got on the BBC's research into advertising, because this was absolutely fascinating to me as I was looking at it earlier, because what we found is that the top 3 formats that affluent millennials say they respond to are online articles, online videos, and TV advertising. And when they were asked to name the one thing that influences the most, they said short video. Would you have guessed that? You're all nodding. Maybe this didn't come as a surprise to you.
No.
Yes, I think a lot of millennials resonate with video as a medium, especially the younger millennials. They grew up with YouTube, they grew up with YouTubers, and it's a medium that really resonates because it feels very real, it feels very conversational, it gives you a look into something that's moving, that's interactive, and it's highly, highly engaging.
But the 3 of you, I wonder, I'm not expecting you to give me exact details, but when you look at your marketing and advertising budget, how much of it is going on
90% of our
video?
budget goes on to digital marketing. And I mentioned earlier, experiential stories and videos is predominantly what we push out, whether it's on Instagram or anywhere on the digital world.
Same. I mean, for us at the tourism board, Magical Kenya, we have many, many small clips of different things, you know, the animals and the different attractions that we have in Kenya. And we advertise as well on TV. Print, not much anymore. So we're all moving towards digital because that's where you actually know or experience something visibly. Yeah.
Now, yesterday morning, I hosted a breakfast event also around this research with marketing directors from a broad range of industries, and we had 3 affluent millennials taking part to answer questions. What I found was fascinating was they said they didn't mind being marketed at, they didn't mind having advertising directed at them, they didn't need the brands to hide behind what they were doing, they accepted that it was part of the game and that it could have value to them.
No, I agree with that. I just think that they have to be smart with the way that they're doing it, and they have to create videos and experiences that are short, quick, impactful, powerful. If you're going to work with a video producer, make sure they're really, really good and they really have amazing cinematographers to showcase your destination in an amazing way, and get it on the right platforms. And also, I think, work with the right influencers. If you want to get your destination seen by various audiences, select different influencers, yes?
So give us some more information on this. You are an influencer, so if someone here was thinking, I want to engage with some influencers, and they gave you a call, what would make you think, yeah, I'll work with these guys, and what would put you off?
I think people that are, again, nimble, they're willing to listen. I think it's a relationship where, like any relationship, it's compromise, it's listening to the other person or other party, and where you can collaborate together to show what you do best with what they have to offer and make it beautiful and interesting enough for people to respond. Because I think if you're working with an influencer and you're paying an influencer, as much as getting the check is lovely, your next check is based on how successful that campaign is. And if you can point to it and say, wow, this was really great and I got a lot of the people who follow me to Kenya, then you feel in some way that you've had a successful moment in your own personal brand and career. So I think partnering with the right people and anything that would turn me off would be more just people that are stuck in old ways. I understand that there's red tape and processes, but you need to have an ear open. And the reason you're hiring the influencer anyway is for something new and different. So,
anyone here hired an influencer or engaged an influencer?
We have, on a couple of occasions, we have hired affluent millennials actually to experience the destination and write whether their stories or video, actually their stories on Instagram or Facebook or whatever their main channel is, or Snapchat. Now, I tell you, you can't necessarily always measure the amount of people that follow them because they've seen that video and they've they've come back. But what you can measure is, the amount of people that talk about it because they've seen it somewhere. And what's really interesting, some people say, I've seen a video about it, I can't remember where. But for us, it's enough that they can recall that they've seen a video about the destination or the experience.
And are you, and we talked about this with the Kenyan delegation before we came out here, are you concerned with guiding people from seeing a video which makes them inspired and actually booking some things, or you leave that jump to them?
I think you'll have to leave that jump to them, and it's really important is when you do hire an influencer that you don't necessarily dictate the itinerary. You're just going to have to set them free and let them go and experience. Yeah. You can make recommendations on what you think they should see and experience, but then it doesn't make sense because you really need to let them go and talk about what they've experienced, whether they liked or they didn't like, both ways, they need to go out and do it themselves. Because once you draw that frame for where you want to keep them, then it becomes unreal.
I think that's a good point, and I think especially on the influencer side, I've been on press trips and the like where it's very prescribed, and I think, well, some of this is great, it's going to work with my audience. Some of this stuff I can't even write about, my audience would hate it, and they would feel like I'm giving them a sales pitch that's not really me, and I think the more natural and organic things come across, the better everything performs. And so I think with brand and influencer partnerships, and I've certainly found this for a lady in London, is that it has to be this discussion, it has to have some freedom and flexibility, and everybody wins. But I think that there's that sort of fear, I think, on behalf of some brands of letting go, but I think it always works out better when they do.
I think in terms of, the influencers, the influencers who are maybe celebrities, people who have influence out there, we have an interesting example in Kenya. The Minister for Tourism is quite well known. He's been there for a while. And he went and he did skydiving on the coast. And after that, the skydiving, everybody wanted to do it. Because this minister risked, he's not a young man, but, he did it himself and showed people that come and enjoy skydiving on the beach. And that influences people. But in terms of going back to short videos, it doesn't have to be like all cut out and done up nicely. Sometimes you may be on a safari and you see a lion kill. And, somebody just posts that up, and it's watched by many people who want to experience that. Because when you go to the field, you want to see an animal hunting another one. And sometimes user-generated material helps in influencing people's decisions. Yeah.
As you were speaking, I was thinking there's probably a few UK ministers who'll have a bit more time to skydive by the end of the day, but we'll see how things shape up in Westminster. One of the people in the audience was asking, what do we do as millennials grow up and cease to be 16 to 34-year-olds? Do you think they are likely to continue these habits into their 30s and 40s? And if they are, how do you evolve the product as they start having kids and changing their requirements?
I think this is one of the ongoing process because with every generation there is new trend comes. For example, in 70s we used to have a large number of hippies. I think these millennials, we can know them as the digital hippies. So I think every destination will be prepared for the changes ahead.
I think the thinking we need to think about now is more what is after Instagram. Facebook, Instagram. Instagram is now the main channel of communication, if you like. So what really is going to be the next Instagram and what is going to be the next millennial?
I have to agree with that. I have to say that I don't know, how their habits will change. I don't think anyone really knows. People can, say they do, but I think, Instagram will die, Facebook will evolve, or Instagram will evolve, and as that evolves, you have to evolve. And it's like life, that's just how it is. And you can't really say, well, these people are going to do this in 20 years because no one really knows. There could be some other platform that's being developed right now that's going to blow everything else out of the water, and none of this is going to matter. So you just have to be nimble, and that's all that matters.
As we approach the end of our discussion, I'm going to bring up one last slide which shows the general conclusions of the BBC's survey. But one issue we haven't got into, which I want to get into, and it's raised by a question here, is the issue of the environment and of being a responsible global citizen, because this has come up again and again in the BBC's research on affluent millennials, that they want to feel like they're doing the right thing. Does that ring true with your experiences?
Yes, and I see more and more tourism boards, not just ourselves, really focusing on sustainable tourism. United Nations World Tourism Organization dedicated 2017 to be the sustainable year for tourism development, and we became a sponsor of that as we are a young destination, so we are an up-and-coming destination. So for us, it's almost like a white canvas, and we resonate well with the millennials because we sort of growing up together here, and the everything that we're creating around adventure is, I want to say this, is nature-based adventure or sustainable tourism adventure. So if you think about the longest zip line in the world, the first Via Ferrata that we ever built is the next best thing to connecting with nature, but you're using your own body weight to generate adventure, and you're not having any machinery or any consumption of anything except solar energy. So I think sustainability or really looking after the environment is what the millennials seem to want to position themselves with. But is that, again, as you mentioned before, is that to feed their own ego, or is that really coming from the heart?
I think a lot of it is coming from the heart. I think millennials as a generation have grown up. We've seen the world changing. We kind of came of age during climate change discussions, and I think people are attuned to that to a certain extent. I've seen a lot of my readers on A Lady in London being interested in specific destinations that promote sustainable tourism. I myself went to Nepal earlier this year to go tracking red pandas in the wild with a charity called the Red Panda Network that does eco trips and promotes sustainability, reducing deforestation by working with local communities. And I think I can personally attest to that, but I can also say that I see it with my readers as well.
I agree. I think on our site, Inspired Citizen, we, our sort of catchphrase is, travel that has the power to change the way you view yourself and what you can offer the world around you. And I think any experience or travel product or brand that has the ability to do that for travelers, and that is being conscious, that is being aware, that is being socially respectful, environmentally respectful. Any brand in the travel business that can echo those sentiments, I think will be impactful, and that will make a big statement to the millennial traveler for sure.
But how do we square all of the things that you're saying with someone who's prepared to jump on a 10-hour flight just because they fancy a few days away, which on the face of it would seem to be a decadent act in terms of the environment?
I think concern about the environment and how energy is used perhaps and how water is conserved, all that comes into what we call in Kenya ecotourism, and there's a lot of that environmental consciousness. And the hotels and the facilities are being encouraged to use more natural resources instead of using energy and wasting water and things like that. But for the millennial, as you said, who is traveling 12 hours to a destination, I think they want to immerse themselves in a community and get to experience that community at a personal level. Mm-hmm. So I think that experience would be something that they would be telling their grandchildren in the future. And so, it's something that they would do. It's a once in a lifetime, perhaps. You don't go 12 hours every year. But, for us in Kenya, it's a long-haul destination for a lot of places. But once you come there, you get an experience that, you can maybe replicate years down the road, but it's not somewhere perhaps that you come every year. So that experience, that immersion in the community, in the cuisine, in the life of the people, I think resonates very well with millennials.
I think your point was towards the carbon footprint of taking a plane. And I think, there's still a quantum leap that the industry as a whole has to take before we start to talk really about full sustainability. And if you think, even if a millennial takes a train to go and stay at a hotel, we all know that hotels have the largest carbon footprint. And I know many hotels are working on activities to reduce their carbon footprint, but it's still not really something that they can put a grasp on. Because until now, you get a paper that you can put on your bed, whether you wash your sheets or you don't wash your sheets, but it's not really...
But are these consumers, are these affluent millennials demanding that changes? Because that's what I'm struggling to understand.
I think they are, but in a way that doesn't disrupt their comfort, you know, and I mean, that's a reality. And, you know, anybody who recycles or does anything for the planet is willing to do it, I think, if it's not too much of an effort. So I think by easing people into it and doing everything you can, I mean, getting on a plane, if I'm in New York and I want to visit Israel this weekend, I have to take a plane. I can't take a hot air balloon. So, you know, it is what it is. But when I get there, I can choose to stay at a hotel.
But you could choose not to go to Israel, couldn't you?
Pardon me?
You could choose not to go to Israel.
I could, but I think that's not really realistic. I don't think people are thinking about their destination of choice by the carbon footprint the plane is going to leave. But I believe that when they get to the destination, they can choose to stay at an eco-friendly hotel that does something for the community, that still offers them some luxury and makes an impact locally, you know, for them. And that, for them, is enough. We can't expect it all to be at one time.
Right, we're on the home straight. Last 2 minutes. One thing from each of you that you think the industry, represented here by this fantastically large audience, should do better to cater for this most important of groups. Let's start down the far end.
I just think communicate the way they want to communicate with you, and, you know, be willing to follow them and be interested in them, and they'll be interested in you. And when you see them post something that resonates or that you feel like you can kind of, I don't want to say copy, but you can sort of emulate or change and make better, do it and show them that you have that, and that will bring them to you. And I think you just all need to be very nimble. Don't get stuck in your old ways, because you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, I agree. We have to be fast. We have to be ready to change to suit their needs. As you said, I mean, they're going to be in their 40s and 50s before you know it. So we need to constantly, but I think the world has a lot of young people, especially in the developing world. The 19 to 35 will be there for a long time. And give them what they want and make it easy for them to get that and experience. I think I will keep talking about immersion. Let them experience the holiday, not just see the sights and sounds.
I think the single biggest thing is to make it easy for millennials to share online about their experience with your product or service. So if you're a hotel, again, good fast Wi-Fi, make your hotel look Instagrammable. If you're a tour company, make sure there's a Wi-Fi hotspot on the tour bus that works at all times. Encourage people to be sharing. Don't say, don't take pictures of this. Have kind of an open attitude about it. And as and when it makes sense, engage with them and engage with their content. Don't do it too salesy, don't do it too pushy, but people like to engage and they like to feel like the brands that they are staying with or participating with are savvy about social media too.
I think the industry needs to stop talking about sustainability and sustainable tourism because it's the decade's sexy word, and start to put actions towards actual sustainability, and you know, start to put targets for hotels and tourism establishments. For example, we've tasked our hotels in Ras Al Khaimah to reduce their waste by 75% in the next 3 years. And this is the direction where, you know, all tourism boards have to start acting in order to get sustainability and really get a environmentally friendly products. Not just talk about, you know, we are sustainable, this is sustainable because it sounds good.
I think millennial segment is contributing more in sustainable tourism practices in action, I believe. So we should encourage them, we should orient them, because they are the future.
Well, on behalf of everyone here, thank you to all 5 of you. Those of you who have come, if you want more information on the BBC survey, either grab me or Hamish or my other colleagues in the next couple of minutes. You can also find information online. But should we say a big thank you to all 5 of our guests?
Thank you.